Ancient religious fraud might not seem relevant today, Sam, but what if I told you one of history's greatest detective stories involves ashes, a dragon, and an elaborate sting operation that would make modern CSI agents jealous?
That's really fascinating, Pappy, because when you look at how this ancient mystery unfolded, it's basically forensic science before forensic science even existed.
So picture this scene in ancient Babylon. There's this massive temple where people leave enormous quantities of food and wine for an idol called Baal. Every single day, the offerings disappear, and everyone's convinced this bronze statue is actually eating it all.
Well, that seems like a pretty obvious scam to modern ears. I mean, how did no one else question this?
That's where Daniel comes in, you know, the famous lion's den guy. But here's what's wild: he doesn't just call it out as fake, he sets up this brilliant sting operation. He spreads the ashes on the temple floor before they seal it up for the night.
So he basically created the ancient equivalent of security cameras with just some ashes?
Exactly. And when they return in the morning, boom, footprints everywhere. Turns out the priests had these secret doors they'd use to sneak in and feast on all the offerings. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This story isn't even in the main book of Daniel. It's from these lesser known texts called the Apocrypha.
So what happened to these priests when they got caught? I mean, that's some serious fraud they were running.
Oh man, the king was furious. He had them all executed and completely destroyed the temple. But here's the thing: Daniel wasn't done yet. The Babylonians then challenged him about this living dragon they worshipped,
Well, that's quite an escalation from exposing fake idol worship to dealing with an actual living creature.
right? And Daniel's solution was um, pretty extreme. He basically creates these deadly cakes made of pitch, fat, and hair. The dragon eats them and dies, proving it's just a mortal creature, not a god.
That seems like a pretty hardcore way to prove a point about false gods.
Well, the Babylonians thought so too. They were so angry they accused the king of becoming Jewish and demanded Daniel's death, which leads to, you guessed it, another lion's den story. But this one's way different from the famous version.
Like, how different are we talking about here?
So, in this version, Daniel's in there for 7 full days, and there's this wild subplot where an angel literally airlifts the prophet Habakkuk from Judea to Babylon to bring Daniel some food, like some kind of ancient supernatural door dash.
That's such a strangely specific detail to include in a religious text. Like, why mention it was stew and bread he brought?
You know, I think those practical details actually make the story more relatable. It's not just about grand miracles, it's about real human needs being met in extraordinary ways. And that's what makes these stories so relevant even today.
The way these stories blend practical problem solving with faith is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
Exactly. And look at how the challenges escalate. First, exposing simple fraud with ashes, then taking on a dragon, and finally facing death in the lion's den. Each test requires more courage and cleverness than the last.
So, what you're saying is these stories aren't just about faith, they're about using your brain and standing up for what you believe in, even when it's dangerous.
That's precisely it, SAM. And in today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with misinformation and pressure to conform, maybe we need these stories more than ever. They remind us that questioning the status quo and exposing truth often requires both wisdom and courage.
and hopefully without having to feed any deadly cakes to dragons in the process, Pappy.
Well, Sam, our modern dragons might wear different disguises, but the principle remains the same. Sometimes you have to be clever and brave enough to challenge what everyone else accepts without question.